Hello viewers, Super GT here. I jumped onto Gran Turismo 7 this week and I found this. It is Autopolis. It's a racetrack in Japan and it's a track that I firmly hate. Now there's many reasons for that. One, it's quite a boring track, but two, overtaking is very difficult. It doesn't usually lend itself to very good racing. So I thought I'd spice it up in my own little way by trying to win a race as slowly as possible. Now, you have to ideally be starting at the front if you want to try this strategy out. So we're going to go through a qualifying lap here. This is my best lap. And ideally, it would put me on pole position because you can't really dictate the pace of a race if you're last. So I decided to follow the ghost of Key 25, as you can see. And another thing that you can see, for those who have not seen this circuit before, is that it is fairly twisty. There's not really much in the way of straights or big braking zones, and therefore overtaking comes at a premium around this circuit. And whenever it comes up on Gran Turismo, it's a track that I look at it and I kind of just, I'm waiting for next week to come around so I can do a different track, because yes, this isn't usually the best track for me. Not normally that quick around here, and well, it's boring. But we're going to try and make it a bit more interesting in this video. As you can see here, this is sort of the next very twisty part of the track, and it's very, very incredibly hard to stay close to another car but also to overtake it. What I am doing though is sticking very close to this ghost of Key 25, meaning that we should be on for a respectable lap time into the long penultimate corner here, leading out onto the main straight. Don't quite get onto the power as early as I could, but it's going to be a solid lap. It's going to be a 1:45.2 as we cross the line, and indeed that is good enough for pole position in my first race. Now, I was aware that fuel saving would have to be done in this race to some extent, but this was my first attempt at the race, and therefore I wasn't quite exactly sure of strategy to employ here. Now for this one, this is a good demonstration of how easy-ish it is to hold people at bay. At the first couple of laps, so this is the end of lap number 3, I managed to pull away by 1.6 seconds, but I had used about 2% too much fuel, so I was due to run out of fuel at this rate. So I had to save quite a lot of fuel in sort of the middle phase of the race. And you can see you're going into lean mix 3 during the twistier sections of the circuit to try to save some fuel. And by the end of lap 8, beginning of lap 9, my fuel deficit was, well, it wasn't really a deficit anymore. But second and third place had just begun to catch up. By the start of the final lap, Rory there in second has pretty much caught right up to me. But this is a demonstration of kind of how easy it is to keep cars at bay here. As long as you don't make any glaring errors, it's going to be quite difficult for the car behind to make a move. So through turn 1, he wasn't able to go past, and that's the best place to overtake. And then coming through at the end of the second sector into the final twisty sector of the lap, this is where things got actually very close indeed. I wasn't quite sure, should I say, of how much fuel I needed to save, having not done the race before. So I was perhaps over-saving. But as long as you stay narrow here, you see the car behind can't quite get past, and I'm definitely driving a bit slower than I could. But this was about to get very, very close indeed. As we come through, I take a look behind, you see just how close he is. Into the final corner, or penultimate corner. See it very narrow, and I was aware that the old switcheroo was possible, so I kind of just held it on the apex. And then it was going to be a drag race to the line, very, very close finish indeed. And I just about hold on by in fact 0.059 of a second. Very, very close indeed. But this gave me the idea for my second attempt to really switch up the strategy. In that first race, I went off quite quickly at the start. In this one, I was going to deliberately drive very slowly and try to win the race a different way. And by very slowly, I don't mean crawl around at 2 miles an hour, because obviously you're not going to be able to win. Everyone will go past you. So you're going to have to just drive a little bit slower than you typically would. And my main idea behind this really is, one, to save fuel, to make sure that I don't run out of fuel and I don't have to save fuel towards the end. But 2, well, if you look here, you see that everyone is backed up very, very closely indeed. I can still back them up a lot more than that. But the idea here really is that eventually at some point during the race, as long as the group behind is quite big, then they're going to start fighting each other and you're going to be able to try to get away. So we're just waiting for a crucial moment in the race where the guys in 2nd, 3rd, 4th, they all start fighting, they get more interested in each other than me, and then I can spring a surprise and try to sprint off into the distance. This is a tactic you sometimes see in real motorsport, although not too much. It does depend on the circuit, I guess. But driving deliberately slowly, you know, I suppose a good example of it was Sergio Perez in Abu Dhabi at the end of 2021, trying to hold up Lewis Hamilton, and that worked very well. But it was for a slightly different reason. But it shows you that it is possible, and it does sometimes happen in the real world. But we're trying to replicate that here in the simulator world of Gran Turismo 7. So end of first lap, and I was very acutely aware that the main overtaking opportunity was into turn 1. Therefore, I was always trying to get a good exit out of the final corner to give myself some breathing distance. But it was through these twisty sections here that I knew that I could afford to be a little bit slower than usual, save a bit of fuel. You see just how close they're getting behind. No real threat though. There's not really much they can do to get alongside, and if they did get alongside, I'll just cover the inside. So the strategy was quite clear cut in my brain. The main difficulty for me, I suppose, is the fact that I'm saving fuel, and therefore I have got the fuel mix up on the bottom right of the screen, and therefore I cannot use the radar. You can switch between the two, but you can't use both at the same time. That's quite a tricky thing to sometimes deal with when you've got cars very close proximity to you. You can see here, as we look behind there, the queue behind, we've got a group of 4, and then maybe 5th, 6th and 7th are just a little bit off. If I just try and drive a little bit slower, then maybe they could catch up. That would certainly make things a lot more interesting. Now, one factor I do have to consider is that whilst yes, I am saving fuel, I suppose by driving slowly, all of the cars behind are also doing the same thing. Therefore, I don't really have anything of an advantage in that sense. But at least once that moment does strike, once that moment does happen where I'm able to get a gap, then I should be okay. 147.8. Now that's about 2 seconds or 1.5 seconds slower than what I know I could drive around the track. I could be into the low 46s or into the 45s on a very good lap. And therefore, that pace is, well, it's inviting pressure, but it's not quite inviting a battle from the cars behind. So everyone's playing it very safely at this point in time. So we're just going to have to be patient, stick to our guns, stick to the strategy, and eventually we're going to wait for that moment to happen. At the moment, everyone's just being very, very calm, just waiting and waiting and waiting. And to be fair, that's quite a reasonable thing to do, as we have a 10-lap race. We don't need to do everything straight away. Out to the exit of this long left towards the hairpin. I suppose the hairpin is a good overtaking opportunity. It's a big braking zone into a tight corner, of which there aren't very many on the track. But I knew that second place there wasn't quite close enough, so there's no need to cover the inside. They're coming down the hill into the 3rd sector. From here, this corner here, this right-hander, very difficult to overtake, extremely difficult to overtake. At the end of the lap, it's going to be a 147.1, so slightly quicker than lap 2, but still about a second slower than I know I can drive. And therefore, we're just waiting for this moment. I know I keep saying it. Driving very slowly out the exit of turn 1 into the hairpin, lap number 4. This is where I had my first quite close shave at this corner at the bottom of the hill. Quite a fast sweeping right-hander, and I didn't quite get the entry right. And as you'll see here, I missed the apex, and therefore I had to sweep over to the right-hand side very quickly on the exit, just to make sure that Rory there in second couldn't put his nose up the inside. So I was still able to stick in the lead, but it was getting closer, and I just sensed the people getting a little bit more aggravated in the immediate positions behind. And this is basically what you're trying to do. You're trying to sort of rile up the drivers behind you to force them into an error. And that error would come here at the beginning of lap number 5, into turn 1 on the brakes, and there's contact from behind. I'm going to slide wide, and the guys in second are going to swap places. Second and third are going to swap places. And now on the inside up against the Spaniard, he's on my left. I'm going to have to go late on the brakes to keep the inside line and keep the lead of the race. So now we've seen the first sign of some sort of distortion to the order. And second and third have swapped. They're just beginning to perhaps get a little bit more irritated. You see just how close it is. There's probably about a group of 6 immediately behind. It's a very close-knit race. And this is where the race really unravels. As we come up the hill towards the hairpin, you're going to have a look at the pink car in 4th, who is going to go up the inside, lunge, and then boom, big contact. And that was the moment I was waiting for. As on the exit, you can see the gap immediately opens up to over a second, and now I'm quite sure that I'm ready to go. I can spring the surprise. I can go, not fuel save anymore, and just try to get away as much as possible. And then a few corners later, the gap was 1.7 seconds, so it's gone from about 0.3 to about 1.7 very quickly. And here's a replay of that moment. Here's on board with the guy in second. Boom, out of nowhere, lunge comes in. And then to further compound their issues, the Spaniard drove to the left of Rory, which was kind of a weird decision. And then there's just a bit of bumping, you see here, pushing each other out of the way. Lots of time lost. And as a result of all of that, just a few moments, boom. I'm now a couple of pixels in the middle distance trying to escape. And that kind of just shows you how a race can turn on just one little moment, or I suppose in this case, 3 moments. There's the contact at turn 1, the contact at the hairpin, and then that next contact down the hill. So 3 moments have opened up that gap. I am now 5% over on fuel, and therefore I can pretty much push from here to the end of the race. Don't really need to fuel save anymore. I have the gap, I have the comfort, and the knowledge that I can just drive to the end of the race. As long as I don't make any glaring errors, then I should be okay, and I am out of slipstream range as well, which is quite crucial. So you can see here 2/10 up on the first split of this lap compared to the fastest lap of the race. At this point of the race, the fastest lap is a 1:46.9, and I know I could definitely go and beat that, as I was driving 1 to 1.5 seconds slower than I normally could. Okay, so at the end of lap number 6, through the final turn, and coming up to the line, what is the lap time going to be? It's a 1:46.1. There we go, that is 1.7 seconds quicker than I managed on lap 2, where I was fully defending. And then at the end of lap 9, the gap opened up to about 2.7 seconds. So I was doing some nice consistent laps, 1:46.3, 3 times in a row. So good solid consistency. And that kind of, the reason I was able to do that really because I was under 0 pressure. I had a solid and comfortable gap to the cars behind. I didn't really have anyone to defend or worry about, and therefore that made it easy. So it was quite an interesting strategy to employ. Slow everyone down, wait for the gap to open, and then just go for it. Ultimately, it was a win, pole position, fastest lap, clean race, and that is one way to do it. Quite an interesting way. But now we have to take a look at Scott Speed. How can the greatest driver on the planet do the same thing? I quickly set a qualifying lap, which put me on pole position, up against only 9 players. So quite worryingly, the American servers here looking quite depleted. But I felt like, let's take this to the extreme now, and really try to drive very slowly. So what I felt like doing was kind of like what Perez was doing in Abu Dhabi, just driving very slowly, but inviting the car behind to go down the outside, where they really just can't do anything. You invite the car to the outside, they're not going to go around your outside, especially coming up into this hairpin, which will be a good example. So I was driving very slowly off that corner. You can see here, the car behind is going to get a good run. I'm going to move to the inside. They have the only choice to go to the outside. There's no way they're going to go around the outside around a hairpin. If they do, you've done something horrifically wrong. Likewise here, driving very slowly. It's so much slower, trust me, when you drive on the inside off of the racing line like this. And we're going to see what the lap time is going to be like in just a moment. But yeah, I felt like taking this to a bit more of the extreme. So at the end of lap 2 it was at 149.3, so that's about 3.5 seconds slower than I could drive. So very, very slow indeed. Into turn 1, covering the inside again. Car behind just really can't do anything about that. And what I wanted to do is try to invite a third player into the battle, and that kind of happened here. As you can see, the yellow car catching up. And covering the inside here on lap number 5. So I didn't know what this guy would be like, but there was this big lunge back from third, made contact, and obviously the yellow car not taking too kindly to that, and side-swiping our orange card opponent into the gravel. This is where my race unravelled a few moments later, as we head down the main straight, covering the inside, and before we get to the braking zone I was going to move back towards the racing line, which is the typical thing to do, but he was having none of that, and then I found myself vaporised into the shadow realm. There it is. By the end of the race I did manage to catch up back to second, 3 seconds off the lead, but it wasn't to be. It wasn't to be. Now that guy said it was my own doing, but upon watching the replay I think it's quite clear to me that I was sent quite deliberately into the shadow realm. Sometimes these things are going to happen, especially if you're driving deliberately very slowly, and it's certainly a tactic that not everyone is going to enjoy, not least the car directly behind you. But that's the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it. I'll catch you next time. Goodbye.